Peace and blessings, beloved. Come here to be educated, empowered, enlightened, inspired, motivated, and challenged to be critical and independent thinkers. Let's get to it.
Select Carmelo Anthony from Syracuse University.
Let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You, me, or nobody is going to hit as hard as life. But it ain't about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. How much you can take and keep moving forward.
The hug for his mom, Mary, who raised 4 children on a housekeeper's wage from the tough streets of Baltimore, learned basketball at age 7 on a crate, 8 feet up. 1 year in college and led Syracuse to 30 wins in its first ever national championship. Carmelo, what'd you learn through the 1 year leading Syracuse to the national title that you have to get better at for next year?
Well, I went through a lot of physical play this year. I learned that basketball, this game is going to get more physical as I move on in my career. I got to get ready to get my conditioning up and get my strength up. Just tighten up my whole game all around.
Peace and blessings, beloved. I pray all is well with you and yours. And welcome to this Life LessonsU video series, Carmelo Anthony, The Value of Mindfulness and the Pitfall of Ego edition. And tonight we're going to look at Carmelo Anthony, a young man whose game I'd respected, and his attention to detail on the offensive end of the basketball, his ability to score in a multitude of ways. I definitely appreciated that, and because of that, I found myself rooting for him. I still really want to. You know, over the years, from Syracuse up until his latest stint with the Rockets, I don't consider myself a fan of anything or anybody, but as much as I love the game of basketball, the grace of it, the nuances of it, the detail, the science of it, everything, I just really appreciate the game, and he was one of those players that I enjoy watching. So having said that, make no mistake about it, I'm going to be totally objective in my analysis of this topic, which again is mindfulness and ego. And anybody who knows the NBA and knows the Carmelo Anthony Saga that is unfolding before our eyes, we know that those two words, mindfulness and ego, are very much pertinent to his story. And so what I plan to accomplish with this analysis, this breakdown, is to raise some important points, some important questions, some important perspectives on the topic of self-awareness and really understanding what it means to be aware of one's lot in life, one's position in life, one's maturity, one's strengths, one's weaknesses, one's ability to continue in his profession, one's ability to continue to contribute at the same level, the same rate, the same peak that he has in the past. And so all of these things will go a long way in solidifying our present and, more importantly, our future. The past is the past. We can't change that. But we can definitely alter our present and for sure alter our future. And so it's important to not be party to our own demise. And I actually have, as a part of the LUSU Designs Apparel line, a piece that reads, "Don't be party to your own demise," which basically means that we all have a great deal to say and a great stake in our own perception and our own trajectory. And while we shouldn't really care about what others think of us, the steps that we take, the paths that we take, do matter. They absolutely do matter. And so again, I'm looking forward to this video, looking forward to breaking down Mr. Carmelo Anthony's career and using it as a backdrop as we always do. This is not an attack Carmelo Anthony video. This is not an anti-Carmelo Anthony video. This is simply using Mr. Anthony as an example in hopes of ensuring that none of us make those same mistakes and that we always maximize on opportunity, recognize our value, are realistic with ourselves, honest with ourselves, and ready to swallow that hard pill that life can sometimes give us.
ESPN is ranking the league's top players, and Carmelo Anthony landed at number 64. Melo, not happy at all, took to Twitter to voice his disdain for the rankings, saying, "Can't make sense out of nonsense. A certain darkness is needed to see the stars. ESPN, don't be so blatant with the disrespect. Hashtag line them up." So players like Lonzo Ball, Eric Gordon, and Robert Covington ended up being ranked ahead of Melo on this list. We know Melo's recent run in New York may have been a disappointment, but is this getting out of hand, Tim? A guy like Lonzo, who has never even played a regular season game in the NBA, being ranked higher than Melo?
Yes, that's out of line, no doubt about it. But I think that they took the approach of Carmelo Anthony is literally a one-trick pony. All he can do is score the basketball. Robert Covington can D up. Lonzo Ball is an excellent passer. He's a great rebounder for his size. Obviously, multiple triple-doubles, never done it in the regular season.
Yep.
But I'm going to ask you some questions about Carmelo Anthony.
Okay.
Once again, he averaged 20 points above again, which he's done throughout his career.
Yep.
How many seasons since he has been in the NBA, since 2003, has he shot over 50% from the field?
1.
0.
I was
How
trying to
many
give him the benefit of the
seasons
doubt.
has he shot over 40% from 3?
0.
1. Okay? Now the bar is 50, 40, 90. How many seasons has he shot 90% from the free throw?
Oh, that would be 9.
0. How many seasons has he averaged 10 rebounds or more?
But the man can score the basketball.
0.
He's a proven scorer,
He's 6'9". He
Stop
averages
it.
like 6
Stop it.
rebounds a game.
The man averages like 25 a game. You can't put Lonzo Ball, who we hope can pass, but we know he can't score. You can't put him ahead of Carmelo Anthony, a proven, bona fide, legit scorer. The one thing he can do is what the game is all about. Put the ball in the basket.
I've played against Carmelo Anthony since we're 15 years old. I remember when he played for Baltimore Select. We played against each other in college when he was at Syracuse and I was at St. John's. Probably the best player I've ever played against. I've played against LeBron. I've played against them all in their prime. He was the best that I've ever played against. But when you look at efficiency numbers, and we're big into that data right now,
True.
And I roll out the 50, 40, 90 because guys are doing that year in and year out. He's done all of those things once in his career, ever. So unless he goes somewhere and wins a championship, I'm sorry, I will look at his NBA career as a massive disappointment.
All right, so what you saw with these two gentlemen having a discussion based on the ESPN NBA ranking that listed Carmelo Anthony at 64. Funny enough, they listed Robert Covington, Lonzo Ball, and Danny Green as 3 players that were listed above Carmelo. Now, while I do think that neither of those 3 should have been listed above Carmelo, you have to ask yourself, what's the criteria for the list? What was the reasoning for Carmelo being 64. You know, what does the league think of him as far as NBA execs, referees, players alike? What the fans think of him? What his upside? So in other words, there are hard criteria and soft criteria. The hard criteria are the stats, analytics, and then you have the soft criteria, which is basically people's opinions, what the image of him is, and then what he's projected as well. So he definitely bears some responsibility. But getting back to the video, I won't debate what number I think he should be listed at, because it doesn't really matter. What matters for this video is the fact that Carmelo Anthony has been party to his own demise, his own fall. And later on, we're going to go over a few other cases of hubris getting in the way of somebody's progress and or success. And so my perspective is different. I look at his game from Syracuse on. He was drafted by the Denver Nuggets and then traded to the New York Knicks. His game has been the same. He's an offensive player, a volume shooter. He's a ball stopper, which he's been called by pretty much everybody. It's true. But what you get from Carmelo Anthony is a very skilled 6'8", 6'9" guy who can give it to you from everywhere on the court. Quite simply put. So anybody who really appreciates and understands the game of basketball knows what Carmelo Anthony's value is. There's not one player who does everything at a high level. But there are specialty players. There are players who get paid to do a certain thing for a certain reason. And so getting back to the video, the gentleman Tim Doyle said that Carmelo's New York run may have been a disappointment. And I see it from a different perspective. I wouldn't say a disappointment, because in order for it to be a disappointment, that means that there was a goal set that wasn't achieved. And in my opinion, based on what I observed from the kind of player that Carmelo has been from day one, you could say Oak Hill Academy, but I'm going to just start with Syracuse, up until being drafted by the Denver Nuggets and then being traded to the New York Knicks. He's been the same player. He's never purported to be anything other than an offensive weapon. He's an assassin, mid-range game, second to none. Fundamentally, I would put him right there with Tim Duncan and Hakeem Olajuwon, two other players who I have a great level of respect for. You know, he used everything in his arsenal. Jab step, juke, triple threat, pump fake, that dribble drive. He can hit it from the elbow, from the post, from the block, baseline, top of the key, tray ball. He has it. And so to say that his New York run was a disappointment means that you thought he was going to somehow put the franchise on his back, and with the rosters that he had, take them to the promised land. And if that is the way you thought, then you're a fool. And I say that with all due respect, because there's no way that anybody who really understands the game of basketball would think that Carmelo Anthony is going to take you to a championship. That's not his game. That's not who he is. And so, to me, his New York run was exactly what it was supposed to be. It was a cash grab for him. And for the New York Knicks organization, it was a way to fill seats for about 5 or 6 years. Because if you think about the New York Knicks organization the last 15 years up until that point, they hadn't really had a good team. You know, I don't know their attendance numbers. I'm not going to go into all of that. It doesn't really matter here. But the point is this. Carmelo came to do a job, and I think he did it. So I would call his New York run a success based on the goal and expectations that were set. Next point he made was Carmelo being a one-trick pony. I pretty much addressed that already. You know, you can call him whatever you want to call him, but he's been consistent, you know, good or bad. He's been consistent. And so there are a lot of players who've made careers off being one-trick ponies who are in the Hall of Fame, you know. And I'll do a postscript video in which I do compare him to other players based on a number of variables, i.e. draft class, and, you know, and player projection comps. And so, again, we'll get deeper into that in the postscript. Back to this clip we just watched. The other gentleman, last name Townsend, I believe, mentioned that the one thing that he can do is what the game is all about. And I just wanted to point out that I disagree for this reason. The game of basketball is about much more than offense. Now, I do understand where that comment came from. The spirit of it was based on what puts people in the seats, you know, what fans want to see. And I get that. That's the business of basketball. But the game of basketball is about everything that you do on that court to help your team win against the opponent. And that includes dirty work. That includes the hustle plays. That includes things like screening and setting picks and boxing out. All those things matter a great deal. And again, if you don't play the game or understand it on that level, then, you know, you won't understand that either. And then Tim Doyle mentioned that Carmelo Anthony is the best player that he's ever played against. Mentioned him being nice since he was a young man in Baltimore. Shout out Baltimore, by the way. Be more careful. But again, man, Carmelo Anthony, people get it twisted, and for the most part, it's young cats who weren't able to see him play live in the Denver Nugget organization. And then even in the early years in the New York Knicks organization, where he went up against LeBron James, they were very evenly matched. They had some battles. Carmelo hit some big shots on LeBron. So again, I say all that to say this. Carmelo Anthony is a heck of a player. What Carmelo Anthony has to do is understand where he is at this stage in his life and maximize on his opportunities based on his goals. Now, some could say that he has done that. I don't know what his goals are. He says he doesn't want to win in one breath, and then he says he wants to win in another breath. And then you look at his career and the choices he's made, you know, choices he could have made versus what he actually did make. And so to me, he's not about winning. He's much more about getting his money and being able to put his numbers up. And if that's the case, double salute. Do you, man? This is a business. I understand the economics of basketball, and I wish more players would understand that and stop being these pro-loyalty people who always talk about, you know, you got to do what you got to do for the team. Look, man, this is my job. Think about your own career. Think about the path you took to get to your career. And think about what your parents told you, what society tells you. And that's to do everything in your power to get a high-paying job so you can live the American dream. So you tell me, has Carmelo Anthony put himself in a position to live the American dream? I rest my case. Like Johnny Cochran on them boys. And so the next point that Tim Doyle makes is based on efficiency. You know, he referenced the recent or the modern NBA wave of analytics. And look, again, Carmelo Anthony has been consistent his entire career. It's not like he took a great dip in field goal percentage. He's been mid-40s since day one. So it is what it is, man. You get what you're going to get from Carmelo Anthony. And then the last point, unless Carmelo wins a ring, his career will be a disappointment. I don't agree with that. Particularly if he goes to the Warriors or another team and is relegated to the bench and gets a ring. I think that would make his career a disappointment because he became a ring chaser when he could have definitely set himself up in his career, in his prime, to get a couple of rings if he really wanted to. So what I think will make his career a disappointment is if he continues to not maximize on his opportunities and put himself in position to showcase his skills. And what I mean by that is this. Carmelo Anthony, and I'll get into this in the next segment, but basically Carmelo Anthony has been a party to his own demise based on decisions that he's made.
No respect on his name. Better put some respect on Carmelo Anthony's name, who's pretty upset about being ranked number 15 in Slam Online's player rankings. Yesterday when the ranking came out on Instagram, damn, they ain't got magazines no more? Melo let Slam know what he thought about the posting. Don't play yourself. And all credibility lost in my eyes. Whoa, look at that. And you can see the online ranking right there. Carmelo Anthony just one under Blake Griffin. So I got to ask you this question, y'all know what I mean? Was the ranking insulting?
Well, keep the sneak. Here's the thing. What's he arguing here? That he should have been 12? Not like I believe in his mind he's thinking 3 to 5, something like that, and he's not 3 to 5. And so you can split hairs and talk about should he have been higher, a little bit lower, but that's around the range where he's at. But again, players are going to be super kind of confident about themselves.
Look at those faces.
And if you're a superstar player, you should think of yourself as a top 5 player at all times when you are a superstar player, which Carmelo Anthony still is. My thing is why is this a story? Like, is it a story because it's still like the preseason and we ain't for real yet? No. Because listen.
Because of media, because of y'all.
because, I mean, to me, it's like some dude responding on Instagram about some magazine that not a whole lot of people read. I mean,
wow. Man, somebody didn't get a job at Slam.
Wow. It's based upon the metrics. I'm just talking about the numbers. It's not like it's New York Times that came out with this. It's Slam Magazine, which is a fun magazine. I read Slam. I don't want to throw any shade, but the fact is that...
Oh, now you're going to play that.
No. I do read it, but it's not like a huge...
It doesn't matter if it's huge or not. We're talking about the ego of a Carmelo Anthony, who is a global icon. No matter what you think of him as a player, he can go anywhere in this world and be respected and garner attention. I think this is a guy who misread this and understanding that, look, if you're 15, the way I would have took this is as a compliment. The compliment is this. There are 30 NBA teams, and you think that I am single-handedly better than half of those teams to be ranked 15. There are 15 other teams that could march out every single guy on their roster, and Carmelo can laugh at those guys. And only 14 in the league better than him, and he must respect the youth movement. There are a lot of good young players ahead of him. I respect that.
I'm sorry. I just don't go with that. If you are an all-star caliber player, if you are the greatest Olympic men's basketball player of all time, which he is...
All time.
Which he is, then you do not think, well, I'm glad I'm better than half the league. No, you still think you're a top 5 player at all times. So I can understand being...
All right, so you have Carmelo's response to being ranked number 15 by Slam Online. And what I want to point out here, very briefly, are a few of the points that were made by the analysts. One being that Carmelo Anthony still believes he's a top 5 player in the NBA. Now, my opinion doesn't really matter for this point. But what's important here to note is that if you look at the current wave of NBA stars in the NBA, and I'm not merely talking about those people that have been propped up by the media, but if you really understand basketball and you really look at the stats, look at the impact, the player impact of a team or on a team, then you know that Carmelo Anthony is not a top 5 player. And you would also venture to say that being ranked number 15 could, by some accounts, be a generous ranking. Now, of course, we don't know what those rankings are based on specifically. I didn't read the article. I don't think that's important to this point, because I know that based on what my understanding of the game of basketball is and who Carmelo Anthony is, I don't think that I don't think it was far-fetched for him to be ranked number 15. Another point was made about him still believing that he's a superstar. Now, of course, if you think you're top 5, clearly you think you're a superstar. But that discussion is always relative to whatever criteria you have, whatever number of tiers you have. Some people say you have the star tier, you have the superstar tier, you have the megastar tier, and then you have the top player. And so, all of that's cool. It's conjectures, good for debates, barbershop talk, whatever. The point is Carmelo's opinion of himself accurate, and the market will answer that question every time. So again, it behooves us to be realistic, because if not, we're just deluding ourselves. We're just fooling ourselves. We're just playing ourselves, which is ironic because Carmelo told the magazine to not play itself and that the magazine has lost all credibility. So I'll say this.
The Denver Post reporting that the deal is finally done. The Carmelo Anthony trade saga is finally over. Anthony going to his desired destination, Madison Square Garden, to play with the Knicks.
If you think about where Carmelo Anthony's career is now, as far as him being cut or released by the Rockets, who's really played themselves and who's really lost all credibility? And then you had the question being posed of why this is a story. That's very simple. We know the media takes different headlines, different sound bites, and they use them for clickbait. They use them to sell advertising. They use them to create a viral video, to create a story that will live on and gain traction. All of these things are done for one purpose: to maximize on monetization. So that's very simple, and he knows that. Again, it's just off a show, it's off of TV, it's entertainment. And then we have the last couple of quotes by Marcellus, one being that Carmelo's a global icon. I do understand what he means by that. Carmelo's been a 4-time Olympic medalist, 3-time gold medal. He's very popular in Puerto Rico, which of course, is still a part of the U.S., but is not traditionally thought of as being a part of the NBA American family. But, he has Puerto Rican lineage, so he has roots there. He has a vested interest there. I believe he has purchased a soccer team either there or somewhere. But again, the point is, yes, he does have a global imprint. However, just because you have that global imprint does not mean that you should assume an inflated view of yourself. Because if you think about it, it's actually counterproductive to his global brand to have that kind of opinion of himself that's delusional, because he ends up looking foolish. Now that's more opinion than objectivity, but I would venture to say that anybody who's being honest with themselves will say that it's foolish to misrepresent yourself, because it ends up hurting you in the end. And then the last 2 points. One is the fact that Marcellus offers up what he would have thought had he been Carmelo Anthony. And I think it's very important to understand what he's saying here when he said that Carmelo misread the ranking. What I take that to mean is that he misinterpreted the ranking and he had the wrong perspective about it. Now, of course, I understand that if you're that competitive, if you've been at the top of your game for that long, you think 15 is a low number. However, it's always a way that you can look at something and see the lesson and blessing in it. And it's all about perspective. It's all about what your value is, what your goal is, what your foundation is. So again, it is to our advantage to be realistic with ourselves, to be honest with ourselves, to always seek to avoid delusion. And then the last point, Marcellus mentioned the youth movement. And basically what that means is this new age of superstars, this new wave of NBA play, and how one has to adapt and adjust. And there's one thing in life that we must know, we must pay attention to, we must heed, and that is the ability to change will carry us far in life. To that individual who's inflexible, who's stubborn, you will get left behind, because the world will not wait for you. Simple as that. So you got to get in where you fit in. Of course, never compromise your integrity, nor your values or principles. But you have to be willing to change. And that requires a certain amount of sacrifice, and it certainly requires an honest evaluation and examination of oneself.